I think we are kind of at a crossroads right now in a similar way that we were in 1992 after the Rodney King situation and the riots, where there is a recognition and a will, I think, on the part of the police department to make the kind of changes that are necessary to continue the progress that we have made since then. And our voice is going to be important. Your input and understanding is going to be important. And we have a panel here that is prepared to help us kind of sort through the issues and figure out what is the best way to understand and impact the change.
But particularly implicit bias is, implicit bias is something very different from overt bias, and training on that. I mean, I don't, as an academic community, we don't even know how to do that. There are a lot of experts that can tell you about their research on the subject, but it's it's another thing to actually implement effective training on issues like that. But those are things that we're pushing for. And I think that those are ideals that, particularly, when you get to the command level of the department, I think it is consistent with what their desire would be. But we might have different views on how we get there. But no one knows, I think that's the most important thing to emphasize, that we're all just sort of trying things out.
Decriminalized and diverted young people from the system, we would not only save billions of dollars, but would save a lot of heartache, and would, for those of us that have gone through the system, give us a different life trajectory than having a felony on our records. For me, I had my first felony at the age of 12, and that permanently altered my life chances. And I'm white, so you can imagine the impact on young people of color. Similarly, we were the first to have police in schools. Police in schools has been now, not just in LA, but across the nation, shown to lead to way increased rates of suspension, expulsion, and arrest in schools. It's primarily African-American youth that are impacted, then behind them Latino youth. There isn't fair policing like in all other realms in schools for white youth and other youth. And similarly, this leads to huge amounts of fines. We really want to push, as a last emphasis, there's 8 bills in the state legislature this year. We call them the Liberate. One of them is Holly Mitchell's bill, 941, Senate Bill 941, which will eliminate fees for families whose loved ones, young people, are in juvenile housing camps throughout the state. So this is just one example of the exorbitant fees and fines that are also exerted against families that are the most vulnerable in our county.
The whole idea in law enforcement of the warrior versus the guardian. We have come from a history for our society of the drug war, of a variety of wars, and real wars out in foreign places. So you see the warrior mentality also applying to how we deal with counterterrorism and a variety of things. That has had a deep and long-lasting effect in law enforcement. And it's something that has to be looked at differently, because we should not, warriors occupy territory. Warriors are made to fight wars. Policing is not a war, and it never should be. And it should not be characterized in those terms. I don't think you can say that the LAPD was constitutionally policing 10 years ago. I think it's very hard to argue that. And so there is a difference. Now, I see constitutional policing as not just about making sure that the police officers are abiding by the Constitution, which is obviously very important, the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. That's a small part of it. Constitutional policing is about our Constitution, which respects and enforces and drives the sense of a participatory government, a government that has an obligation to reflect what the people need and want. It's basically the mission of the League of Women Voters, to promote active participation, informed participation. That is what constitutional policing is. That's why community policing is not just a good subject or a nice name, but it is an obligation of a police department to work with the communities and represent the communities it serves. Because police have the most powerful power of government there is, which is the state-sanctioned power to take away the life of a fellow citizen. There is no other government institution that has that legal authority. That is the most powerful thing in any society, which is why it has to be under civilian control, which is why it should not be part of a war, where the rules of engagement are very different and should not be what is in a democracy, which is why that sense of responsibility and professionalism is so critical in any police officer's role. There's obviously a lot of criticism of the police, and sometimes police don't do the right thing. But one thing I'll tell you is those police officers work in those communities because they see that violence every day and they want to do something about it. But they are not equipped to deal with the broader social issues that are causing it. And that's where we as a society have to stand up and do something about it.
That the ultimate goal of all of us must be much broader than that. It must be to improve the health, wealth, and well-being of all communities, particularly those plagued by poverty, racism, sexism, and want. Sometimes what frustrates me when I do these Saturday panels and we all come and we all just kind of leave shaking our heads, oh, ain't that a shame? And I think, what really came of this? Was there an action? Is there an action anybody in the room is really gonna follow up on? And so, the old joke says, a surgeon is always gonna recommend surgery. And so as a policymaker, I would ask, in addition to the things that are outlined and what other councils talk about, that you take the documents prepared for you today by League of Women Voters, look at the bills, and if you do nothing else but call your own assembly member or senator and ask them their position or what was their vote or what they're gonna do on this legislation. Because, like I said, they're difficult to get past. You may not be in Sacramento walking halls lobbying every day, but law enforcement representatives are. And so if you're comfortable with only their perspective influencing this legislation, then we have all wasted our collective time this Saturday morning.